You're listening to Secrets of a Bridal Seamstress podcast. I'm your host, Nadine Bozeman. In this podcast, I'm sharing business systems and strategies specifically tailored to the bridal sewing industry so you can build your own modern and profitable bridal alterations business. Join me as I also get to chat with fellow seamstresses and share their personal success stories. I'm so glad you're here and that we can grow together in this unique trade. Okay, I'm so excited for this episode. I get to chat with Melanie and Malea from Brilliant Bridal. One of them actually lives in Arizona and the other lives in Colorado. And together, they also host the White Dress Optional podcast. And it's a relatively new podcast. It's for couples, so it's not for like wedding vendors like us. And they interview other wedding pros. And so it's a really cool podcast resource for newlyweds. And I think it's kind of cool for us to tune into those type of podcasts too, because then we kind of understand what's relevant, what's actually being talked about in the wedding industry beyond just our little sewing world. You know what I'm saying? So I've asked them to come on to chat about their podcast and also about their work at Brilliant Bridal. So Brilliant Bridal has 7 locations that they opened within the past 13 years. And they have a lot of experience, obviously, with brides, with current trends, with all the things. So it's a really fun conversation. They also give us some good insight on the relationship between stylists and shop owners and seamstresses, and what we can do as seamstresses to just encourage and nurture a really healthy relationship with those business partners. So great episode. And I look forward to hearing what you think about it. Okay, let's get right to it. So tell us what inspired the podcast, because both of you have been working with brides with Brilliant Bridal. And let's talk about like the conception of the podcast. We were talking a little bit before recording of how season 1 took off and you just cranked out like 35 episodes that we said in your first season. You hit the road running. So tell us about how that all started and then what you learned after season 1. And I'm sure you were just so like elated to keep going when you saw that success.
Yeah, we really started the whole process probably 2 or 3 years ago. It kind of popped on our radar that this is something that we wanted to do as another way to reach out to brides as an audience. Some of our markets that we are in have gotten increasingly competitive over the years. It's really become more difficult in some of those areas to differentiate ourselves from other bridal stores. And part of our mission with Brilliant Bridal has always been to be empowering, educating, enabling brides, transparent with brides. And for us, this was just another medium of being able to do that and being able to connect with brides, being able to give them tools and resources, both from us and our experience, but also from other vendors that we have relationships with. And I think it's interesting because there are wedding podcasts out there and there are wedding planning podcasts out there. But when we were researching it, it didn't really seem that any had stuck really significantly. And we hypothesized that it's because weddings are not a repeat customer business, as we all know. And so if you have to monetize a podcast and make a living off of it, you're not really going to in the wedding space. And so we kind of saw a unique opportunity where we have a successful business. It provides what we need it to provide for us and our employees. So why don't we step out and, do something that could potentially be a little bit more sustainable because we don't need it to be a source of revenue. Does that make sense?
Right. Oh, totally. It was just another way to market in a really fun, personal way. I think that's like brilliant, pun intended. So where are your 3 locations? Because I didn't realize that even today we have an Arizona rep and we have a Colorado rep. Are those your first 2 locations for Brilliant Bridal?
So we have 7 locations altogether. And I know it's been a journey. We have 2 in Arizona, and then yes, Colorado was our 3rd location. And
Okay.
then we added Las Vegas, and then we added Dallas, and then we added Houston, and most recently this year we added Fort Worth.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Thank you.
That is awesome. So were either of you at the first location in Arizona?
I am the founder, one of the founders. We have another partner, and so I've been here all along. And then
Oh
Malea
my
came
gosh.
in.
Okay, but you're so young.
Well,
That is
that's the
so funny.
filter.
I'm
Thank
picturing
you.
somebody like very mature who's been, just like overtime opening 7 successful bridal shops. But it's like, that is incredible.
Thank you. It's
Oh
been
my
13
gosh.
years, and we both have had all
Again,
of
my
our
jaw is
children
on
in
the
that
floor
amount
because
of time.
13 years is not long for 7 stores to open. That's amazing.
Yeah,
Sorry, I
thank
can't
you.
wrap my head around that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I feel like our concept we've kind of nailed it down. So we're all off the rack.
Mm.
We're designer overstock is like half of our product, and the other half is our own line of dresses. And so we've got private labels, we've got designer overstock, and we've been able to repeat that in a lot of different markets. And brides like it. They like the ability to walk out the door same day with their brand new dress. It's still a brand new dress, but they don't have to wait for it. And so in times where shipping is difficult in the last couple of years, we've seen that be a problem. We don't have those same issues. So a lot of the stress that comes with reorder stores, we don't have that, which is really, really lovely. We have other stress, but not that
Yeah,
part.
yeah. That is so cool. And I just love how you're like, okay, we're excelling in this thing. We're opening up all these different locations. The next natural step is to obviously have podcasts. And then you're reaching like the country and beyond. But like you're reaching, I mean, the potential is incredible. So that's just so
Thank you.
smart. I'm really, really excited. And now I want to like, we'll have a little coffee date after this so I can pick your brain about other things, other insight. Okay, so what kind of experiences at Brilliant Bridal prepared you for the podcast? I mean, talking about maybe potential pain points that you wanted to address, or even like when you thought of like marketing and what you were learning from like your in-store experience, the marketing and advertising that you wanted to take to the podcast, kind of talk us through the in-store experiences that helped out the podcast.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that, the business itself has been around for 13 years now. Both Malia and I had wedding industry experience before we started this business. So between the two of us, we have lots of wedding industry experience. But then with all of the different locations, we literally serve thousands of brides a year.
Mm.
And we do get lots of stories, but we just have a really broad diversity of clients and brides and families that we get to, observe and connect with and hear, what they're going through. And, I think there is for years and years, there's been a lot of secrecy around weddings and around wedding planning and around the industry. And I think the industry has kind of held on to that as like a bit of a power move. And we just don't see any need for that. And so I think that was, kind of the impetus of trying to get brides more information. And then I just think, I don't know, Malia, what your thoughts are, but I think we just have so much to pull from in terms of not only our experience, but other people we know in the industry.
Mhm.
I think some of it is like things that we would commonly hear from our brides, like questions we were answering over and over again. And like if our brides are asking these questions, whether it be about the dress or alterations or about wedding planning, we can just start answering some of those questions and have them in one place for our brides. So that's kind of a lot of like that inspiration is really just because we've been working with brides for so long.
Yeah, you're like, let's just crank this out. It's like a live Q&A or like the FAQ page
Yes.
brought to life
Mhm.
with your podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have like for this episode, you have an audience full of bridal seamstresses that are like tuning in.
Whom we love
Yeah, we
so
want
We
to hear
love
your
our
much. Thank you
seamstresses.
for
perspective.
everything you do.
So in addition to the thanks, what would you like your seamstresses, or whether they work directly with your brides or around the country, what would you like us to know? Like, what is there something that you wish that we knew or that we could do even better for our feeder stores? I don't want to put you in the spot because I know this wasn't what we talked about previously, but it's kind of like a gold mine here.
I think the biggest question brides are always asking us is the prices of alterations and being more transparent with those. When brides come back to us, they're like, I didn't realize it was going to be that expensive. And we'll quote for them and we'll say, okay, here are the seamstresses we like to work with. This is the range. And then they get there and it's not in that range. And so I think that is from a bridal stylist perspective,
Mm-hmm.
one of the more challenging things. I would think the second thing would be anytime you can offer to go into one of your feeder stores and do education of like, this is what it takes to alter a dress, or here's some things you can and can't do. There's so much that as stylists we don't know. We're like, oh yeah, they can totally hem that, or they can totally add that or change
Yeah.
that. And then they see the seamstress, and the seamstress is like, well, actually I can, but it's really difficult. And let me tell you why. So
Yeah.
those would be my two things: price point and education. Like if
Yeah.
you could find a way to get into some of your stores and do a training with the stylist, it's going to help you out significantly, but it's also going to help out those stylists in confidently talking about alterations.
Oh, I
have a number
totally.
3.
Oh, keep going. Yes. I
Sorry.
agree so far with two for two. Yes.
I would just say the other thing we run into a lot is just assuming the best intent between the bridal store seamstress relationship. Like, we are not trying to set you up to fail, and we hope, and most of our seamstresses we know are not trying to set us up to fail. But if there is a miscommunication, or if we have said something incorrectly to a bride, or honestly, probably what happens most of the time is a bride heard what she wanted to hear from us, didn't hear what we actually said, took it to you as the seamstress, and you're like, I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's just assume the best intent and try to like work it out. And we're all in this together.
Absolutely. I want to start from the top because, like, yes, 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 and yes. So, first thing was the price point, and I feel like I don't know why sometimes there's this idea that being elusive with prices is going to help you in the long run. Like it may work as like a bait and switch, but then once the client actually gets into your studio or comes to your house or wherever you work, it's like then you're just creating a super awkward conversation. And sometimes the bride will just kind of sign the contract or be like, okay, because they feel kind of stuck or they didn't know that there were other options. At this point, they're in a time crunch. And then it does circle back to the shop owner where it's like, you didn't tell me that I'm going to be paying as much. It's almost as much as the cost of my dress, like I'm sure you've heard that too, or it's more than what I paid for the dress. So for seamstresses, what I would suggest is having a ballpark on your website. You don't need to go through like your whole menu of like, this is each hem, but like I have, okay, basic alterations are between 6 and 8. Adding customizations is going to be between like 8 and 11. Adding embellishments or whatever. I forget what the order is, but like there are 3 price points that are like super obvious. And it kind of like does weed out some brides too, where they're like, okay, I'm kind of a budget bride. This isn't for me, whatever. But then they're going into it with some knowledge. And then step 2 is once I receive like their intake form and their photos, I give a quote as much for my sake as for theirs. Cause I don't want them coming in if they're feeling like, I didn't know it was going to be that much. So at least by the time we're going to be face to face, they're going to know that this is about how much you're going to pay me. And it just saves from so much awkwardness. Cause I used to be that way where I was like so afraid about talking about money that I'd be like, okay, I don't even know if I would talk about it. Like, gosh, my first couple of years, I don't even know if I would talk about price until I just sent an invoice. You know what I mean? Cause it was like, I was so cringy about it. And that was on me. But like the more forthcoming that you can be, it not only helps your brides, but it helps you as a seamstress to avoid all the awkwardness. And then the second thing was pricing and then education, going into the bridal shops and being assertive with like starting the conversation or starting the relationship. Like that is, and I think probably, I don't know if it'll so much be the case with you because you have so many, like, I'm assuming you have a lot of like one of a kind dresses at your
Mhm.
shops.
Yeah.
But for most shops who are ordering gowns, they're going to be selling, they're going to have like frequent flyers. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So you can pull, like, there's this one dress that I can totally, it's an allure dress. I already can picture it. I think I worked on it like 6 or 7 times last year, and it's like the wide set straps, and the women with like not square shoulders, really having a hard time keeping the dress up. So like you can talk about the specific frequent flyer dresses with these, salons and say like, okay, I know this is a top seller. Here's actually why it's going to be one of the most expensive dresses to alter or whatever, go through it. But I think the relationship piece, it just is like a win-win on both sides because communication is going to be easy. You trust each other. And then that leads into truly giving each other the benefit of the doubt. Because when you're saying, what a bride hears and then what they bring into the fitting, and I'm like, oh, what they said, what? But then I know, girl, I know they didn't say that to you. Instead
Exactly.
of like spiraling and like thinking the worst of the shop, it's like, okay, no, I know that they're not going to recommend that I do this or whatever. And it just saves so much drama if you just assume the best in both parties. And it's like, but you're not going to do that unless you have a relationship to begin with. You know what I mean? So if you're listening, take this to heart, take some notes, and it's okay to be the assertive one in this relationship and just get in the shops and start pulling dresses and talking about, here's how much this alteration would cost. Here's, how this would look different once you order it in their size or whatever. So great little tips. Thank you. Okay. So moving backwards to those pain points that we originally talked about. What are some pain points that either you figured out as podcast hosts or at Brilliant Bridal that you're seeing more frequently in 2024 and that maybe you're projecting to see in 2025 that we as wedding vendors can maybe get ahead of and like help our future clients out?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think we
I
have a
mean,
couple of them. One for me is brides are having a hard time making decisions. So they, it's like they can try on every dress possible and they want to try on 100 different dresses because they feel like they have to. I don't know if it's just a cultural thing, it's a instant gratification thing, like that they can always look for the next thing. They can always check another site. They can and so we're finding that brides are having a hard time just pulling the trigger in a way that hasn't been as difficult before. And even just like, well, do you like this style or that style? I don't know. I don't know what I
Yeah.
like. And so we've had to do a lot of education with our staff on like, well, let's help them figure that out. And how do we help walk them through those things so that the decisions are easier and we give them less questions? We don't have to ask them about every detail. And so we've had to educate our staff in that regard, but brides are having a hard time making decisions.
What were you going to say, Melanie?
I don't think this is a surprise to anybody in the industry, but it is just everything is budget. Every conversation is budget. Every couple comes in with a budget. The budgets are smaller. The budgets are less flexible. Couples just really seem, and I think everybody really is feeling the squeeze on finances right now. Anytime you go to the grocery store, you're like, well, I'm gonna take out a loan for that one.
Mhm.
So I think that has been really difficult to navigate because a lot of brides, and because of our business model being off the rack and a little bit more of a value-based business anyway, we're always dealing with budgets, but we're usually able to massage that conversation and get a bride something she loves and is happy with, either for within her budget or stretch her budget. But brides initially, if they're either the first in their friend group or their family to shop or to get married, they don't know how far a budget goes. And so we will still get the brides coming in with pictures of, $20,000 couture dresses saying, okay, this is what I love, but my budget's $500. And we're like, babe, we love that dress too, but not happening. So,
I'm sure you do love it.
yeah, exactly. So that's, and I don't think and we have had conversations with other vendors on our podcast about this same experience, both people who are in higher end weddings within the industry and people who are kind of more mid-market. Everybody seems to be feeling the squeeze on budget and
Mhm.
stretching budgets, no budgets. So I don't know that that's going away anytime soon.
I know. And I think too, like, there's so much pressure for the gram and to have
Mm.
like the best of the best in the photos, and for the photos and the posting more so sometimes than the experience itself. So it's
Mhm.
like, okay, well, the tablescape is not so much something that maybe you and your party and your guests will totally enjoy, but it's like it's going to be so worth it for the photos. So it's like that is such a big part of their budgeting too, which was like not a thing when I got married in 2012. I mean, it kind of was, but it was like Facebook. It
Yeah,
wasn't even Instagram.
for
Facebook
sure.
fans were so low. Yeah, exactly. And I can see that too with brides now kind of choosing even what alterations they want done. Whereas before they'd be like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, just fit it to me, whatever it takes. And now sometimes I'm just seeing brides like, okay, I'll do this, but I don't really want to do this. And I'm like, oh, that's new. So, but like you said, that's not
Interesting.
really something that we could like find a solution for, with that. I'm not going to be changing my prices, but I am going to be more communicative of the cost of each item so that the bride knows like, okay, these are the choices. This is how we can kind of like cheat a little bit if you need to cheat. I know some listeners are like really like, no, there's only one way, but there are different ways to alter a dress, to work within a budget. And so for some items, you can say like, okay, this is kind of, these are your 3 options of how this can be done to fit your budget. But I love how you mentioned the decision making. And I can see that working for us in fittings where we can help the bride by not, like you said, asking so many questions. Cause I know I've been there where I'm like, do you want the sleeve, this like the swag off the shoulder sleeves? Do you want this long or this long? Instead, I've started to say, okay, if it's this length, you won't be able to hug people. Or, I'll explain it and kind of make the decision for them. And then they're like, okay, yeah, right. And then the being more assertive in bookings, because if they're checking out all these different vendors, like let's make it easy for them just to like, you don't even
Yeah.
need to hit reply. Okay, I'm going to put you in my schedule unless I hear otherwise or whatever. Like just make the decision to work with you even easier so they don't just get stuck on the decision making. So yeah, that's really helpful. So you kind of already hit this, but like the strategies, are you changing any of your strategies at your stores to work with 2025 couples? Or is it just kind of like, this is kind of where we are economically. This is the culture of brides wanting to try on a bazillion dresses. Or do you have strategies to work with those issues?
Yeah, I think we've been trying to do a lot in terms of like how can brides contact us at any time. So can we be non-traditional and say like you don't have to call us on the phone, but like how can I make it easy? Like if decision making
Mhm.
is difficult, what can I do that's easy? Kind of like what you were saying, like can I make sure that I have a place that they can text me because they don't want to talk on the phone?
Mhm.
Can they DM us on Instagram and get the information they need that way quickly? Can we be where they are and making it as easy as possible for them just to come in to see us in the very beginning?
Mhm.
And then the other side of that is just adjusting how we help them make decisions in the same way you were talking about. Like I can, make the decision for them. If there's 30 veils in the store, I've got 5 that would look good on this dress. I'm going to pull 2, like I don't need to
Yes.
pull
Yes.
that many options for her because it's just going to overwhelm her. So give
Mhm.
her the best, like be an expert. You are the expert. You're the seamstress. You know better. You know that the sleeve is going to look better here, not there. So don't even offer the other one,
Right. Right. Yes.
I feel
Yeah.
like we think that we're doing the brides like we're being like helpful or kind and being like, look at all these things and all these options. But for today's bride, that's just too much. They don't want that. They want the expert to tell them what to do and then they're going to go for it. So don't be afraid to be the expert.
I love that. Don't be afraid to be the expert. That is so brilliant because I think everybody can relate to that. Or if you have maybe a loud, like mother sitting on the couch or like a really invasive BFF and like you kind of like get a little timid, but remind yourself you are the expert in the situation and it's okay to speak what you know. Like this isn't the time to hold back. All
Exactly.
right. So what trends are you seeing, whether it's like with dresses or just wedding planning, since you're interviewing a lot of wedding pros, what trends are you anticipating for 2025? And then how is Brilliant Bridal preparing to work with those trends?
Yeah. So let's talk about dresses since that's what your seamstresses are going to be
Yay!
seeing.
Okay. I was hoping
Um,
you would.
I know, right? Okay, so clean dresses are very, very in and just like really escalating. So anything clean. And in that same vein, basque waists are in. And I don't know why. I don't know why they had to come back. I think I cannot. But my team keeps asking for them. So they tried one on yesterday, and one of them, even a person on our team that's not even engaged was like crying in a dress saying yes to a basque waist dress yesterday while we were like trying it on to see if we wanted to carry it in the store. So you're going to be seeing that. And then if we're going into laces, a lot of 3D lace accents. And then we're also seeing floral. So like a floral colors of dress or on the veil. So different accents in there. We are doing a lot of veils that have a floral piece to them that are really lovely, and this like incredible statement. So I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of that. And from a wedding trend perspective, and I think this is where that floral veil is coming into play, is brides are now hiring not only a photographer, but a social media coordinator for their wedding, who is recording all the content that they would want to put on social media, and they're going to do it on their phone for them. So it's all ready to be postable quickly. They're making reels in real time so that they're ready to be posted when the bride and groom are ready, or the bride and the groom. They're all making sure that like they are ready to post quickly. And I think those photographical moments of having this really dramatic floral veil is where those pieces are starting to come in, and why the brides are using them. But those are some trends I know that we've started seeing that I think will definitely be true in 2025.
I think I'm excited about everything except the clean and simple dresses, because those are the hardest to alter.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
I'm not surprised. And honestly, they're not for everyone. Like
Yeah.
brides come in with a picture of that, and it's not always the most flattering. And so we've had to do a lot of
They're not
education on
forgiving.
our end. No, right? And so we've had it like brides come in with their like Pinterest board and inspo pictures and be like, yeah, okay, let me put you in something that I think you'll actually really love. And but still having to like, let's try that on so you know what it looks like. But we've had to really be like, just because she's asking for it doesn't mean that's the right dress for her. So let's
Right.
find her a dress that she can feel super confident in.
Yeah. And then those of you who crank out veils, you got to add some 3D color to the veils.
Yes.
I
Yes.
got lit
If
up
you can
here
add some
seeing that.
color, do it.
Yes. Okay. Well, you heard it here first. We can be ahead of the trends. What, as a business owner, keeps you moving forward? Like you just described these trends that you're anticipating, and like how you're going to be planning for, bringing in accessories that's going to match the current trends, or even talking about like, okay, content is going to be such a big thing, even more so moving into 2025. So since you know that, like, what do you do? How do you continually move forward and not get stuck in this funk of like, this is how we do the things, and you know
Honestly, we hire young people. I thank you so much for your nice compliment earlier in looking young. I'll take it, skincare routine, but we are not young, especially compared to the brides that, the Gen Zs that are coming up. And we really lean on our team who are in that generation to inform us and to, help us. And, we collaborate a lot with our team and to make those decisions. But, if you're a solopreneur and somebody who doesn't have a team around you, or can't do that, find an intern, find a niece, find a neighbor, find somebody who is in that generation that speaks the language that's native to the Gen Zs, and can help you and can kind of give you some guidance, or will work with you, or collab with you some way, because it does move fast. And the things that were you know, cool on Instagram 2 months ago, they're gone.
Yep.
And we're on to new TikTok dances, and we are on to new things. So you really have to find some sort of way to invest into a person, I think, who understands all of that and doesn't it I could figure it out. It would take me so much more time and effort to try to figure out how to stay ahead of the trends, or even with the trends, than it does somebody who is of that generation.
Oh, I know. It's like so much like brain work that, and then I'm like, and then I still got nothing done. Like if I'm trying
Yeah,
to think so hard
exactly.
about funny things, it's like, yeah, it's just really hard. Do you have a best kept secret? I mean, you have 7 stores in 13 years, like something's working. You got some mojo happening here. So like, what is your best kept secret, or secrets of a bridal seamstress as a
Sure,
business
sure.
owner?
I think this I feel like this is controversial to say, especially in the bridal gown industry, bridal shop industry, but we just really don't gatekeep our brides. We don't charge for appointments. We don't qualify our brides. We don't ask for wedding dates or engagement status. We don't charge more for plus size dresses. We don't add fees on, like, we are a uniquely volume-based bridal store business, and I understand that not all business models in the industry work like ours, but I
Right.
do see this trend towards tighter and tighter parameters around who can be your ideal client. And I just don't know how that's going to work for businesses. I think you have to try to be more and more inclusive. And yes, will that result in you maybe wasting some time with a client who isn't your ideal client? Probably. But if you are good at sales and you are good at closing, and the more people you can get into your business and can talk to about the benefits of your product or your dress or your alterations, I just think that the openness and the transparency, that's how we have always operated, and we're constantly trying to find ways of, okay, how can we be more inclusive? How can we open our doors to more people? How can
Mhm.
we make space for more diversity or more budgets or more styles
Mhm.
or whatever the case may be? I don't see how these more restricted parameters around customers is going to be beneficial.
Yeah, I'd say especially in a retail space where it's like a one-time customer to make one purchase with you, and you're, like you said, it's like such a narrow door. I can totally see that. I think with alterations, or like with service based, we do want to be like, we know what we want to do, what we can't do. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it
Sure.
is a little different, but like with retail, I totally see, and especially with like your business model of how it's, you also want to serve the brides who are like, they're ready now. They want to do this thing now, or maybe they just want to get the dress in their closet now, even they're getting married in 2 years or whatever their time, their timetable is. It's like, let's not have that be part of the equation either. And being flexible. It sounds like you guys are really flexible with change. That's what I've noticed just in this conversation of like, you're open to switching things up if need be. So
And
Yeah,
I
I
would
think we
honestly
have
say that, yeah,
Yeah,
go
we've had
ahead.
to adapt. Like over the 13 years, there are times, especially during COVID, that we're like, let's shift. What do we need to be doing differently? And we've had conversations of, should we charge for appointments? Everybody else does, is that something we need to do? And we keep coming back to, no, I don't think that's for us. But we have had to adapt a lot of different things over the years because we have to stay flexible with each generation and what they need.
right. Yeah, totally. What do you see for Brilliant Bridal in the next few years? Do you see like another store popping up, or what are your goals? Or is it top secret?
Not top secret. I think more stores are always something we will talk about if we find the right market and the right people to run it. Mel and I aren't in every city, so we have to find the right people. So we're pretty particular about where we'll end up next, but I think a few more Brilliant Bridals could pop up in a couple more markets. I think there's some room. The concept works well, and we have a really incredible team. We have a phenomenal team. So when we say we open a new store, somebody else is opening the new store, and Mel and I get to be like, yeah, guys, you guys did a great job. It looks beautiful. So
I
it's a really
trust.
cool place to be. Yeah. And like I said, our team is phenomenal. So
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to follow along. Before we wrap up, this is like totally not related to business, bridal, nothing. But I always like to, well, not always. This has been like a recent question that I've been tagging on to interviews because I like to know what people would be up to if they weren't in the wedding industry or if they weren't in like the sewing industry. So, what would your day job be like in an alternate universe where you weren't in the wedding industry?
okay, I got this question. I was like, okay, I like to teach and I like to coach, but it would be so fun. Our local zoo always has people standing outside of the animals being like, this is Bingo, the Bengal tiger. Let me tell you all about him. I would totally do that. I would totally be that woman standing outside of the tiger cage or the gorillas to
With
be
like a
like, let
parrot
me
on
tell
your
you.
arm.
Yes, and be like, let me tell you all about this animal. Like, let me educate you. Like, that sounds so dreamy. Like, I'd be outside every day. I don't know. I could be that person. I like to teach, so maybe that's where I head next. I don't
Oh, that
know.
was very
You'll find
specific.
me.
So
You'll
thanks
find me.
for
I
that.
know, right? You'll find me at the local zoo.
Oh my
Okay, I didn't realize that we were going into an alternate universe for this question. So that being the case,
God.
I would be a food critic. I would 100% be a food critic, or I would be a travel influencer. So I could either, my job was to eat good food and tell people about it, or my job was to tell people how to travel. And obviously, you have to travel to tell people how to
Right.
travel. So,
In the best way to give the best tips.
right.
Obviously. Well, there's still time, ladies. So if this doesn't work out, zoos will be there, travel will be
Retirement
there.
plan, right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, if we have listeners who have questions or they want to run things by you as, the representatives of like shop owners around the country, where can they get a hold of you? And then tell us about your podcast of how we can tune in.
Absolutely. So, best place would be to message us on Instagram at Brilliant Bridal. We can definitely answer questions there, anything that anybody wants to know. We do try to be as open as we can. There are some secrets we don't like to tell, but we do try to be as open as we can. And then the podcast is on all the major podcast platforms. It's called the White Dress Optional Podcast. It is bride and couple based. We aren't at this time, creating content for other wedding industry professionals. But if you are a wedding industry professional and you would like to come talk on our podcast about what you do, we would love to connect. And you can DM us there as well. It's just White Dress Optional on Instagram. Might be White Dress Optional Podcast on Instagram. It's one of those. You search it. There's nobody else named
And it
that.
is
You
great
can
to
find
listen
it.
to because you're hearing what is current. You know what I mean? Like it helps you just stay like relevant to the conversation of like what is happening outside of our little sewing world. So that's definitely where, and like you mentioned, there aren't many wedding podcasts for couples. A lot of them are for other vendors. So it's, or, like
Right.
vendor coaching. So it's like, that's something kind of rare these days. And I think it's a great resource for those of us in the industry. So thank you so much. I'm really excited to get this episode out. And I'll be on the lookout for your next location too. All right. Thanks,
Fantastic.
ladies. And we'll see you on the Instagrams.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and share this podcast with a friend. And if you're feeling really generous, leave a review. Thanks, everyone.